But today we're going to talk about how someone drowned in chocolate. It sounds completely impossible, right? But it's a real and truly tragic story. We're going to break down how something so delicious turned into a deadly trap. It's this wild mix of physics, biology, and just a really, really unlucky series of events.
Yeah, that's the first thing you think, isn't it? How can anyone possibly drown in chocolate? It seriously sounds like something from a fantasy movie, not real life. But it did happen, and the science behind why it happened is, well, it's fascinating, but it's also pretty horrifying. So let's get into it. How is this even possible?
All right, to really get what happened, we have to travel back to 2009. Picture this, a chocolate factory. You're probably thinking of sweet smells, happy thoughts, right? But on this one particular day, that factory became the scene of a truly terrible accident. Like so many accidents, this one started with something totally normal. Just a routine task. A worker was up on a platform, doing his job, loading stuff into this huge vat of warm, melted chocolate. But then, just one wrong move. A simple slip. He lost his balance and fell right into the tub. Now, falling into a giant vat of anything is bad, obviously. But that fall, that was just the start of the problem. The first, most immediate danger wasn't actually the chocolate itself. It was what was in the chocolate.
See, these industrial tubs aren't just sitting there. They have these huge mixing blades inside, constantly turning and churning to keep the chocolate smooth. So when the worker fell in, he fell right onto that powerful moving machinery.
And that collision, it was devastating. Right away, he had these major injuries that basically made it impossible for him to move. He couldn't even begin to try and pull himself out. So from the second he hit that vat, the situation was already incredibly critical. And believe it or not, that still wasn't the worst part. Okay, so this is where the whole thing shifts. It stops being just a tragic mechanical accident and becomes a physics problem, a trap. Because the real inescapable danger, it turns out, was the chocolate itself. So to really wrap our heads around this, we've got to talk about a little something called viscosity. It sounds like a complicated science word, but it's actually super simple. Viscosity is just the thickness of a liquid, how much it resists flowing. Think about the difference between pouring water versus pouring honey. That's viscosity. Right. So if you fall into water which has super low viscosity, you can splash around, you can move your arms, you can swim. But warm chocolate, its viscosity is incredibly high. Trying to move through it would be like trying to swim through, I don't know, thick mud or even wet cement. It fights you on every single movement. Honestly, the best way to picture it is this. The chocolate acted just like quicksand. The sheer thickness and density of it created this perfect natural trap. Getting out on your own? Almost impossible. So let's recap where we are. We have a seriously injured worker trapped in a liquid that is basically acting like quicksand, and this horrible combination. It created this tragic paradox that sealed his fate. And here's that paradox I mentioned. It's just awful. What's your first instinct when you're trapped? You struggle, right? You fight to get out. But in that high viscosity chocolate, every single move he made to try and push himself up, it just made him sink deeper. It's exactly what happens in quicksand. The very act of trying to survive was making everything worse faster. Eventually, trapped by that thick, heavy liquid and unable to get free, he was pulled under. So even with the terrible fall and the injuries from the machinery, the official cause of death was suffocation. He literally drowned in chocolate. It is just an unbelievably grim story. But what's the lesson here? What we learn from something like this? I think this whole thing is just a powerful reminder that sometimes the biggest dangers are hiding in places and things we think are totally ordinary. It just goes to show you the power of physics all around us every single day. We look at chocolate and we see a delicious treat, but its basic physical properties, they're what turned it into a lethal trap. It really makes you think, doesn't it? What other completely normal things in our lives could be extraordinarily dangerous if the circumstances were just slightly different?